When Marcus Hayes signed his name, he did it with a flourish, slow, deliberate, theatrical. The pen scratched across the paper like a victory lap. He leaned back in the leather chair and smiled as if the room itself belonged to him now. I stood across the table, hands folded, watching the man I once loved celebrate what he thought was his escape. "Done," he said, tossing the pen aside. "Clean break, finally." The champagne bottle was already open. I hadn't noticed when he'd uncorked it. The pop echoed too loudly in the apartment I'd paid for with 4 years of overtime, bonuses, and discipline. Foam spilled onto the marble counter, dripping down like something wounded. Marcus laughed. "You have any idea what comes next?" he asked, pouring himself a glass he didn't offer to share. "This is leverage, real leverage, the kind that turns doors into suggestions." I said nothing. He walked past me, glass in hand, eyes already drifting toward his phone. Listings, numbers, futures he believed were guaranteed. "You should start packing," he added casually. "I'm selling this place. It never suited me anyway. Too small. Too practical. Practical." The word landed like an insult. He was wearing a tailored jacket that cost more than my first car, paid for with a credit line he'd opened in my name without telling me. His hair was perfect. His confidence unshaken. Grief hadn't touched him despite the fact that we'd buried his father just hours earlier. "The funeral ended 4 hours ago," I said quietly. Marcus waved a hand. "Old news. My father lived in the past. I'm interested in momentum." He scrolled, eyes lighting up. "Penthouse downtown, private elevator, floor-to-ceiling glass. Might buy the unit above it too, just to make a point." He finally looked at me then, really looked, and whatever warmth had once lived in his eyes was gone. "You were useful," he said, like he was stating a fact. "Stability, infrastructure, while I planned the big moves." Useful. I felt something cold settle behind my ribs, heavy and patient. "I filed this morning," he continued. "Fast track. I want everything clean before probate clears." Before probate. That was when I understood something Marcus didn't. He thought the signature meant freedom. He thought the papers unlocked money. But some doors don't open when you sign them. Some doors burn. I reached into my coat pocket and touched the edge of a business card I hadn't shown him yet. An attorney's name. A message left after the funeral. A warning Marcus had never heard. "Fine," I said calmly. "I'll go." He grinned. "See, you always knew when to step aside." I turned toward the bedroom, already planning what to leave behind. Behind me, Marcus raised his glass. He had no idea the clock had already started. Marcus believed he'd won the moment the ink dried, but the real game hadn't even begun. I packed quietly. Not because I was afraid of waking Marcus, but because silence gave me space to think. Every folded shirt, every zipper pull, every click of the suitcase felt like punctuation, ending one sentence, preparing for another. From the living room, his voice carried easily. "I don't care about the delivery window," he snapped into his phone. "If I'm paying cash, I expect urgency." Cash. The word almost made me laugh. Marcus had always spoken money into existence before it ever arrived, like confidence alone could summon it. For years, I'd been the one filling the gaps, covering rent, smoothing overdrafts, turning chaos into solvency. He called it support. I called it survival. I slid my laptop into my bag and paused. There it was again. That familiar pressure in my chest. Not sadness, not anger, containment. The feeling you get when you know something important, but aren't ready to release it yet. "Hey," Marcus called out. "Leave the garment steamer." I stared at it for a moment, then dropped it straight into the trash. The memory came uninvited. 3 years earlier. A hotel bar. A professional mixer with bad wine and forced smiles. I'd gone because my manager told me invisibility was a career risk. Marcus had appeared like he belonged there. Effortless, polished, speaking in vision statements and future tense. "I'm taking time off to care for my father," he'd said back then, voice gentle, eyes sincere. "Family matters more than exits." It was a beautiful lie. I zipped the suitcase shut. The night the lie cracked had nothing to do with romance. It had to do with receipts. I'd found them by accident, folded invoices tucked into a gym bag Marcus never used. Private nursing services, daily rates that could pay a mortgage. Instructions written in careful language. Remain unseen when family is present. When I confronted him, he hadn't panicked. He'd calculated. "You don't understand delegation," he'd said calmly, feeding the papers into the flame on the stove. "Leadership means distance." That was the moment I stopped defending him to myself. A knock echoed in my memory, the hospital room days ago, his father's hand gripping mine, surprisingly strong. "Promise me you'll be there," he'd whispered. "For the reading." Marcus said there was nothing to read, said everything was handled, said the future was settled. Men like Marcus mistake confidence for certainty. I rolled my suitcase into the hallway. He was seated at the table now, a new document spread neatly in front of him, pen ready. "Before you go," he said smoothly, "sign this, it protects you." I scanned the page. Legal language. Dense, intentional. Buried halfway down was the truth. A clause severing any claim to future assets tied to his family name. He wasn't protecting me. He was preemptively erasing me. I smiled, small, tired, genuine. "Nice try," I said, tearing the paper clean in half. His face changed instantly. Not rage yet. Fear. I left without another word. That night, in a quiet hotel room that smelled like disinfectant and second chances, my phone buzzed. One message. "Tomorrow. 10 a.m., don't be late." I lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. Marcus thought the story was over. It hadn't even reached the footnote. Marcus spent years manipulating numbers, but tomorrow he'd learn the difference between value and control. The law office didn't look like the kind of place where lives collapsed. Glass. Steel. Order. Everything polished to the point of emotional sterility. From 40 floors up, the city looked harmless. Tiny cars, obedient streets, a world reduced to patterns you could pretend to control. Marcus arrived early. Of course he did. He sat sprawled across a leather chair like a king waiting for tribute, one ankle resting on his knee, phone in hand. He was already wearing a new suit, light gray, sharp cut, loud in the way expensive things sometimes are. The watch on his wrist gleamed as he gestured while recording a voice note. "Liquidate the position," he murmured. "I want flexibility by noon." Flexibility. Another word he liked to cosplay. I took the chair farthest from him. He glanced up, smirked. "You actually showed. I figured you'd be home crying or Googling studio apartments." "I'm just keeping a promise," I said. "To who?" he scoffed. "The past." Before I could answer, the door opened. The attorney entered without ceremony, older, silver-haired, posture straight enough to feel like judgment. He carried a thick folder, the kind that doesn't contain good news for everyone. "Let's begin," he said, sitting down. Marcus leaned forward, energized. "Perfect, I'm on a schedule." The attorney didn't acknowledge that. He opened the folder slowly, deliberately, like timing mattered. He began with formalities, language that sounded like static. Marcus tapped his foot, impatience vibrating through the room. Then came the number. "An estate valued at approximately," Marcus mouthed it silently before it was finished. 210. I watched his face bloom with certainty. But certainty is fragile. "Distributed under the following conditions." Marcus blinked. "Conditions?" The attorney didn't look up. "Yes." Silence stretched. "The estate is bequeathed to the son," the attorney continued, "provided that at the time of death and for a period of 1 year thereafter, he remains lawfully married to his spouse." The air left the room. Marcus's smile froze, then cracked. "That's," he laughed once, sharp and hollow, "that's not possible, I filed." "Yes," the attorney said calmly. "Yesterday, prior to the funeral." Marcus turned to me, eyes suddenly alert. "Tell him we're reconciling." I didn't move. "In the event the marriage is dissolved," the attorney continued, "the estate transfers in full to a charitable foundation." Marcus stood abruptly. "This is manipulation." "She poisoned him." "No," the attorney replied. "Your father planned." He pressed a button on the desk. The screen lit up. A hospital room, a frail man, clear eyes. Marcus's father looked directly into the camera. "If you're watching this," the recording said, "it means you chose speed over loyalty." Marcus staggered back as if struck. The man on the screen spoke gently, but without mercy. "I loved you, but I would not fund your destruction." The video ended. Marcus whispered, "This isn't real." But it was. And reality, unlike Marcus, didn't negotiate. For the first time in his life, Marcus faced a number he couldn't spin, 0 control. Marcus didn't scream at first. He just stood there, mouth slightly open, eyes darting between the dark screen and the attorney's face, as if one of them might blink and admit this was all a misunderstanding. His confidence leaked out slowly, like air from a punctured tire, quiet, irreversible. "There has to be something," he said finally, voice thinner than I'd ever heard it. "A contingency. A fallback." The attorney closed the folder halfway, then opened it again with deliberate care. "There is," hope flared too quickly in Marcus's eyes. "A stipend," the attorney continued. $50,000. Marcus exhaled sharply. "That's it. It is placed in trust." Marcus's smile returned for half a second. "Fine, transfer it." The attorney didn't smile back. 10,000 released immediately, the remainder after 6 months of verified full-time employment. The word landed like a slap. "Employment," Marcus repeated. "You mean a job?" "Yes, a salaried position, wages, taxes." Marcus laughed, high, brittle, unhinged. "I don't work for other people." "Then," the attorney said calmly, "you will not receive the remainder." Marcus turned to me, eyes wild now. "You did this?" "No," I said softly. "I survived you." He dropped to his knees. Actually dropped, hands hitting the carpet, suit wrinkling, pride shattering in real time. He reached for me like gravity itself had betrayed him. "We can fix this," he pleaded. "We'll tell them we reconciled. We'll reverse the filing." I stepped back. "You threw me out," I said. "You called me replaceable. You tried to trick me into signing away my future." "That was strategy," he sobbed. I panicked. "No," I said. "You revealed yourself." Security appeared at the door, summoned without drama. Marcus didn't resist as they helped him up. He didn't threaten lawsuits now. He didn't posture. He just looked empty. As they escorted him out, his voice echoed down the hallway. Not rage, not ambition, loss. The attorney exhaled once, long and measured. "I'm sorry you had to witness that." "I didn't," I said. "I witnessed closure." He slid a small envelope across the desk. "This is separate, a personal gift." Inside was a modest check and a handwritten note, "Build something real." Months later, I stood in a classroom that smelled like dry erase markers and possibility. Young faces watched as I wrote 2 words on the board: asset, liability. "Sometimes," I said, "the most expensive liability isn't debt." A phone buzzed in my pocket after class. A photo, grainy. A man behind a retail counter wearing a uniform too bright for his skin. Marcus. Working, I didn't smile. I breathed. Balance had been restored. Marcus lost the fortune, but the real reckoning was still unfolding. People assume the moment justice lands, everything feels lighter. It doesn't. The weeks after the reading were quiet in a way that felt unfamiliar. No late-night arguments. No emergency transfers. No apologetic texts wrapped in arrogance. Just silence, wide, open, and unsettling. I moved into a smaller place across town. Not temporary, intentional. Sunlight in the mornings. Neighbors who nodded but didn't pry. Furniture chosen slowly, paid for outright. Every receipt felt like proof of something earned rather than borrowed. For the first time in years, my bank account didn't feel like a battlefield. The Foundations Board asked me to stay on, not as a favor but as a necessity. I helped design programs, budgets, guardrails. We taught people how money actually worked. Not fantasies, not shortcuts. Just systems, consequences, patience. At night, exhaustion replaced anxiety. That was new. Marcus, on the other hand, unraveled loudly. Mutual acquaintances reached out under the guise of concern. "Is it true? What happened to him?" "Did you really?" I stopped answering. I didn't need to correct the narrative. Marcus was doing that himself. He tried to contest the will. Lost. Tried to pitch investors. None returned his calls. Tried to borrow. Credit lines closed like synchronized doors. The illusion had depended on motion. Without momentum, it collapsed. One afternoon, months later, I ran into him by accident. A grocery store. Middle of the day. He was standing in the frozen aisle, staring at discount meals like they were written in a foreign language. The confidence was gone. The posture, too. He looked smaller, not physically, but internally, like someone who'd finally met gravity. He saw me. For a moment, neither of us moved. "You look different," he said. "So do you," I replied. He nodded once like he was bracing against something heavy. "I'm working now." "I know," that surprised him. "They make you clock in," he added bitterly. "Every minute." "Yes," I said, "that's how jobs work." He laughed weakly. "You always liked structure." "No," I corrected. "I liked reality." He opened his mouth, then closed it. There was nothing left to negotiate. When I walked away, I didn't feel victorious. I felt finished. That night, I opened the old journal I'd kept through the worst years, pages full of justifications, apologies, numbers trying to balance emotions that never did. I didn't tear it up. I wrote one final sentence at the end. Closure isn't loud. It's quiet enough to hear yourself again. I closed the book and turned off the light. For the first time, tomorrow felt neutral, and neutral felt like freedom. Marcus thought losing money was the punishment, but losing the illusion hurt far more. 6 months after the reading, I stopped flinching when my phone rang. That might sound small, but for years every vibration had meant a problem. An overdraft, a demand, a crisis Marcus had created and expected me to neutralize. Silence used to feel dangerous. Now it felt earned. The foundation expanded faster than anyone predicted, not because of money, but because of trust. People showed up. Single parents, first-generation students, small business owners who'd been told their confusion meant failure. I didn't sell them dreams. I showed them spreadsheets. Cash flow, risk, boundaries. The unglamorous truth Marcus had always despised. Every class ended the same way. Money doesn't reward confidence, I'd say. It rewards consistency. Sometimes I wondered if Marcus would have survived if he'd ever learned that lesson. Then I'd see him again. Not directly, never directly, but through fragments. A forwarded photo, a whispered update. A story someone couldn't help telling because downfall is treated like entertainment. He'd lost the job at the electronics store after missing too many shifts. Overslept. Missed deadlines. Argued with a manager half his age about long-term vision. Next came rideshare driving. Then delivery work. Always temporary. Always beneath him in his own mind. That was the real punishment. Not poverty, but humiliation without an audience to impress. One evening, an unfamiliar number appeared on my phone. I didn't answer. A voicemail followed. It was Marcus. His voice sounded rougher, like it had been scraped against reality too many times. "I just wanted to say I get it now," he said. "Not everything, but enough." I deleted the message without replying. Understanding doesn't entitle anyone to access. A week later, a letter arrived at the foundation addressed to me. No return address. Inside was a single check, $10,000, the first installment. He'd finally held a job long enough to qualify. I stared at the check for a long time. Then I endorsed it to the foundation's emergency fund. It felt appropriate. That night, I walked home instead of taking a cab. The city buzzed around me, ordinary people living ordinary lives, managing ordinary responsibilities. The kind Marcus used to sneer at. I'd once mistaken spectacle for success. Now I knew better. Success was sleeping without dread. Success was choosing peace over potential. Success was knowing no one could pull the ground out from under you anymore. Some lessons are expensive. Some people pay them too late. And some, finally, stop paying for other people's mistakes. Marcus was learning responsibility one paycheck at a time, but the final lesson was still ahead. The city moved on. It always does. New headlines replaced old scandals. New faces filled the bars Marcus once treated like boardrooms. His name stopped circulating, first as gossip, then as memory, then not at all. That disappearance hurt him more than any financial loss ever could, because Marcus needed witnesses. I learned this slowly, through distance, through the absence of his chaos, through the quiet realization that my life no longer reacted to his. One afternoon, nearly a year after the reading, I saw him again, this time clearly, undeniably, without intermediaries or second-hand stories. He was sitting on a bench outside a municipal building, shoulders hunched, a paper bag at his feet. Inside the bag, a lunch packed at home, cheap bread, a bruised apple, practical food. He didn't notice me at first. I watched him for a moment, not with bitterness, not with satisfaction, but with something closer to anthropological curiosity. This was Marcus stripped of audience, stripped of narrative. No one to impress. No one to dominate, just a man waiting. When he finally looked up and saw me, his first instinct wasn't charm or aggression. It was embarrassment. He stood too quickly. Hey, hey, I replied. He gestured vaguely at the building. Orientation, new job, facilities management. Congratulations, I said and meant it. That surprised him. He rubbed the back of his neck. It's not, you know. I know, I said. It's real. We stood there awkwardly, two people who shared history but no future. I used to think money proved something, he said suddenly, that it meant I mattered. And now, I asked. He exhaled. Now I think I just didn't know who I was without it. That was the closest thing to accountability I'd ever heard from him. I won't apologize, he added quickly. Not because I don't regret it, but because apologies don't fix what I broke. I nodded. That's true, silence again. I won't contact you anymore, he said finally. I just wanted you to see that I didn't disappear. I met his eyes. They were tired, honest. Smaller somehow, but steadier. I see you, I said. Then I walked away. Not because I was done healing, but because I already had. That night I stood on my balcony, city lights stretching endlessly, and understood something simple and irreversible. Marcus's story no longer intersected with mine. Not as a villain, not as a lesson, not even as a warning. He was just a person moving forward at the speed of his choices. And I was free. Marcus had finally learned who he was without money, but my final chapter wasn't about him at all. The strange thing about freedom is how ordinary it feels once you're inside it. No fireworks, no applause, no dramatic closing scene where the past begs for relevance. Life simply continues, and that continuation is the reward. A year after everything unraveled, I stopped marking time by what I'd escaped. I marked it by what I'd built. The Foundations programs expanded into neighborhoods that had been ignored for decades. We taught budgeting in community centers that smelled like old books and hope. We explained credit in rooms where people had been punished for not understanding it. There was nothing glamorous about the work, but it changed lives quietly, permanently. That mattered more than numbers ever had. On my desk sat a framed index card. One sentence, handwritten, "Stability is a form of power." I read it often, not because I feared forgetting, but because remembering felt grounding. Occasionally, someone would still ask about Marcus, usually in hushed tones, usually out of curiosity, not concern. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if things were different? I always gave the same answer. No, because I knew. Different choices would have delayed the ending, not changed it. Some people confuse potential with destiny. Marcus did. For years, he believed the future owed him something simply because he imagined it vividly enough. But imagination without discipline is just fantasy. And fantasy collapses the moment reality asks for receipts. I didn't hate him. I didn't forgive him either. I simply released him from relevance. One evening, as I locked up the office, I caught my reflection in the glass door. Older, calmer, softer in ways that didn't mean weaker. I realized I no longer introduced myself by my job, my marriage, or my resilience. I was just myself. That was new. At home, I cooked dinner slowly. Real food, music low, windows open. A life with margins wide enough to breathe. No one waiting to extract something from me. No one mistaking my steadiness for submission. Before bed, I opened a fresh notebook and wrote the first line of something new. Not a warning. Not a record. A plan. Because survival had turned into direction and direction into choice. And choice, I'd learned, is the rarest luxury of all. Some people lose fortunes. Others gain freedom. The difference is knowing what was never worth keeping.